Hey there everybody, and welcome to our test review. Today is practice test number 1. It says number 1 because this time around we actually have 2 practice tests. So you will have the practice test today and you'll have another one tomorrow, and then you'll have the test on the next day. Okay, so you know the drill with the practice tests. I'm going to do every single one of these problems. So hopefully you have already done your entire practice test and you've checked it against the answer key, and then you kind of have an idea of which problems you need help with and which problems you don't. And then you can just kind of fast forward and rewind through this video and watch me work those problems that you do need help with. So you're not expected to watch the entire video because I know these do get a little bit long. Okay, I'm going to get started with problem number 1. 85% of 160 is what number? Okay, so 85%, let's change that into a decimal. So we're going to move the decimal 2 places. Boom, boom, and it's going to go right there. So of 160, when we say of, that's usually multiplication. So I'm going to say 85 times 160 is, that's my equal sign, what number? Well, if you don't know what it is, that's going to be your variable. So I'm just going to write an X right there. Now I'm just going to grab my calculator and I'm going to do the math on that. So 0.85 times 160 equals 136. 136 equals X. And that's all you need to do. If you want to just write 136 by itself, that's totally fine also. Let's do 6 is what percent of 48? So let me translate that into math. 6 is what percent? I don't know. We'll write P of 48. So times 48. And if you'd rather write 6 equals 48P like this, that is totally fine too. That kind of looks more normal to us, but this is the same order as the sentence. It doesn't matter. Now to get the P by itself, you're going to divide by the 48, and you're going to get P equals, let's do 6 divided by 48. 0.125. But I'm not done yet because that P reminds me I still need to move my decimal point. So we're going to move it 2 places and we're going to wind up with 12.5, and then we have to write the percent sign. Don't forget that percent sign. So move the decimal and write the percent sign when it's asking for a percent. Okay, now 18 is, so 18 equals 39%. Let's write it as a decimal. You never want to put the raw percentage into your equations. You always want to write it as a decimal. Of what number? So we'll say times our variable. I'll just say X. Now get that X by itself by dividing on both sides. 18 divided by 0.39 gives us 46.15. Is that 3 big enough to bump the 5 up to a 6? No, it's not. So I'm going to leave it at 46.15. Alrighty. What is 64% of 118? So what, we don't know what, so let's write a variable. Let's do X. Is going to be your equals sign. 64%, okay, we're putting the 64% into an equation, so let's make it into a decimal by moving 2 places. So 0.64 of 118. Of is going to mean times or multiplication, so we'll just write it like this, to be 0.64 times 118. Now we just put it in the calculator just like that, and see what we get. 0.64 times 118. Looks like we get 75.52. All right, so we got those first 4. Let's go on to the next section. Find the percent change to the nearest hundredth and state whether it is an increase or a decrease. Hopefully I'll remember to write this increase or decrease on all of the problems. Remember, increase is where it goes up and decrease is where it goes down. So when you have these problems about percent change, the first thing you want to do is find the amount of change by subtracting the 2 numbers. And you want that amount of change to always be a positive number. So 160 minus 100. Notice I'm flipping the order around so that the number comes out positive. This is going to be 60. So originally you had 100 whatevers and the new number was 160. So the amount of change is this. You had an increase of 60. Okay, so now let's find that as a percentage. So basically, P percent of the original, I'm just going to write it all out in words, equals the amount of increase. Or decrease if we were doing a decrease problem. So we don't know the percent. Let's do P percent of what was the original. The original was 100. So equals the amount of increase, which was 60. Okay, now let's just go ahead and write that in math. You know what? I'm already using some math. I wrote that equal sign instead of the word is. Sometimes I do that. It's just habit, right? So P percent of 100. So P times 100 equals 60. Now let's divide both sides by 100 to get rid of that 100 there and make that P by itself. And you're going to get 60 divided by 100 equals 0.6. And now that P reminds me, I am not done yet. I'm not done until I move the decimal 2 places. So I'm going to move it 1 here, and then I'm going to move it again, which means I'm going to have to put a 0 right there. And I'm going to wind up with 60% increase. All right. So that's the answer to your problem there. Let's go on to number 6. Now there's a star here, which sometimes means to watch out. I think that's just because he's mixed up the new and the original. So originally it was $6.35 and the new price is $19.45. So it is an increase. You started at $6.35 and you went to $19.45. Let's subtract these two numbers and figure out the amount of increase. So $19.45 minus $6.35 equals, whoops, wrote that wrong, 19.45 minus 6.35 is going to give us 13.1. 13.1 increase. Okay, so this is the amount of change here. We're going to use basically the same formula. P percent of the original is going to be the amount of the increase. So P percent of, and the original is this price, 6.35, is 13.1. Okay, now let's write it in math. P of 6.35 is going to be multiplying, so times 6.35 is 13.1. Okay, now let's get the P by itself. So divide out that 6.35, and P is going to be equal to 13.1 divided by 6.35, 2.06. Now when I have all these decimals, I'm going to keep 5 decimal places because that way that allows for me moving the decimal and for rounding. So let's do that. 2.06299. Okay, good. So now I'm not done. That P reminds me I have to move that decimal 2 places. So it's going to be 206 point. Now take a look here. This 9 is going to bump that 9 up basically to a 10. So this is going to be a 0 and this is going to become a 3. So I'm going to get 30 there. Percent. And is it increase or decrease? It was an increase. Now this is a pretty big increase. 206 something percent. So let's go back and look. Did it more than double? It did more than double. In fact, it kind of looks like it tripled, right? So a nice big number here makes sense. And let's go to the next problem. Number 7. The old price is 93, the new price is 70. What is the amount of change? And was it increase or decrease? It was a decrease. And to find that decrease, we do 93 minus 70, and that is going to give us 23. So the amount of decrease is 23. Now we're going to use the same kind of setup. So P percent of the original price is the decrease, 23. Okay, now write it in math. So this time I'm going to say P times 93 is our equal sign, and then that equals 23. Now you want that P by itself, so we have to get rid of the 93 by dividing it. And P is going to equal 23 divided by 93, which is, all right, lots of numbers here, folks. We're still going to keep those 5 decimal places. 0.24731. Okay, now I've got room to move my decimal and to round and still have the nearest hundredth. So that P reminds me to move my decimal 2 places, and I'm going to wind up with 24.7. Now, is the 3 going to be rounded up to a 4? Let's look at the next number. It's a 1. No, we don't need to round it up. So we'll just keep it as a 4. Don't forget the percent sign. And then also, it was a decrease, so we're going to write that word right there. And that is how you do that problem. Let's go on to number 8. Last week, students sold 44 magazine subscriptions. This week, they sold 99. Okay, so the old number is 44. The new number is 99. That was an increase because it went up. And to find the change, we're going to do 99 minus 44. Do whatever order gives you a positive number, okay, guys? 44 minus 99 would give you a negative number. That's why we're not doing it that way around. And that's going to give us 55. So it's an increase of 55. So now let's set it up. We're going to use the same basic setup. P% of the old, which was 44, is the amount of change, which was 55. And now write it as an equation. P times 44 is, which is a equal sign, and then 55. By the way, if you like to write it this way, 44P equals 55, totally fine. That kind of looks more like what we're used to. I'm just doing it the same order as the sentence, but whichever way works for you, you're going to get the same answer, so it's all good. Let's get the P by itself by dividing by 44. So P equals, let's see, 55 divided by 44, and that's going to be 1.25. Now, am I done? No, that P reminds me I need to move the decimal 2 places, and I'm going to get 125, don't forget the percent sign. And now, just a reminder, it was an increase, so let's write that right there. And now I'm done. Now 125%, that's a pretty big increase. So anytime it's over 100, it should have more than doubled. So let's take a look. Did it more than double? Let's see, 44 plus 44 is 88. Yeah, it did more than double. Okay, so it looks like our answer makes sense. Let's go to the next section. Find the final cost to the nearest cent. Okay, this is that section where there's 2 ways to do it. So I'm going to go through and do these all one way, and then I'm going to go through and do them all another way. So just pick and choose which way you want to do it. I'll do one way in pink and one way in green. So the old way in pink. So for the old way, we're going to do $39 shirt. And we need to figure out what 7.5% of that shirt is, so we can figure out what the sales tax is, and then we're going to add it together. So 7.5% of 39 is going to be this. 39 times the percentage, but remember, we don't want to put the percent in the equation. We have to change it to a decimal first. So move that decimal point 2 places, which means you have to put a 0 there. So 0.075. And that is going to equal the tax. Okay, so now let's just take our calculator and figure out this amount. 39 times 0.075. Looks like the tax on that shirt is 2.9. We're going to round that 2 up to a 3, okay? 2.93, $2.93 for the tax. Okay, now, is this the total price of the shirt? That doesn't make sense, right? No, you have to take the amount of the tax and add it to the original price of the shirt. So 2.93 plus 39 is going to equal the new price. So 2.93 plus 39 is going to equal 41.93. So $41.93. Okay, that's the one way to do it. I'm going to do a little divider and switch to green, and we'll do it the other way. So now the other way is to add, okay, if you're going to increase, then you're going to add the percentage to 100. Whereas if you're decreasing, you're going to subtract the percentage from 100. In this case with sales tax and tip and all of these, you're going to be adding it because they're all an increase in prices. So 7.5% plus 100% equals 107.5%. Okay, now you're going to multiply your original amount times the new percentage. You're going to take this percent of the original amount. So 39 times Don't forget to turn this into a decimal. You don't want to put any raw percentages in your equations. So turning that into decimal, you get 1.075. Okay, so now you have 107.5% of 39. Let's see what that equals. 39 times 1.075, and you get 41.925. That 5 right there, let's see if you can see that better. This 5 will bump that 2 up to a 3, so I'm just going to write $41.93, which is just what we got over here, and they should be the same, that's for sure, but there are definitely those two different ways of getting that same answer. Okay, let's go to number 9. I'll switch back to pink and we'll do it the old way. So the old way is to figure out first the tip and then add the two amounts together. So we're going to take 15% of 38.75. That means we're going to multiply them together. But don't put the percentage in. Make sure you change it to a decimal, which is going to be 0.15. And that is going to equal the amount of the tip. Let's see what it's going to be. So 38.75 times 0.15, it's going to give us $5.81. $5.81. You don't really have to have the dollar sign there. Sometimes it's just habit, you know? Okay, so now is this the new price of the meal? No, because we are calculating the final cost. So what we need to do is add this tip amount back to the original meal amount, and then we'll know the final cost, excuse me. So 38.75 plus 5.81, and this should give us our total, $44.56. So $44.56 total. All right, so that's the one way. Let's do it the other way now. Now this is a price increase, so we're going to do 15% plus 100%, and that's going to equal 115%. Okay, now we're going to take 115% of the original, so 38.75 times 115%, got to change it to a decimal, boop, boop, it's going to be 1.15, and what is that going to equal? Well, it should equal the same thing. Let's make sure Ms. Smith did it right. 38.75 times 1.15, and you get 44.56. Perfect. Okay, so there's two ways to do that one. Let's go to number 11. I'll show you both ways on this one as well. So you have your $48 bouquet, and it has 5% sales tax. Let's go ahead and figure out the tax, and then we'll add that back to the total. No, we'll add that back to the original to get the total. So 5% of 48, you're going to do 48 times, let's move the decimal. Oh, looks like we need to add a 0 there. 0.05, and that's going to be, that will be, wait for it, sorry, 2.4. I couldn't find that enter button there. 2.4, in other words, $2.40. You can always add another 0 on the end. Just know that 2.4 is not the same as $2.04. It would have to be $2.40. So this is the amount of the tax. Let's add that plus the 48, which was original. So 240 plus the original price of 48, and you're going to get $50.40 total. Okay. Now, let's do it the other way. Again, it's a price increase, so you can just take the percentage and add it to 100%. And that's going to be 105%. Now you're going to multiply that percentage by the original price. So 48 times, don't forget to turn that into a decimal, 1.05. And that is going to equal, hopefully the same thing I got there, 48 times 1.05, $50.4. $50.4. You need to add another 0 on the end there, and it'll be 40 cents. You always want to make sure you have 2 decimal places when we're talking about money. Otherwise, it doesn't really look like a money number, right? Okay, we've got one more of these. $24.33 pizza order, and then an 18% tip. Let's calculate the tip first, and then we'll add it to this number for our new total. So $24.33 times an 18% tip, so move that decimal point, 0.18 equals, looks like we're going to get 4.379. That 9 right there is going to bump this up to an 8, so I'm going to say 438. Now take this amount, this is the amount of the tip, right? You got to add it to the amount of the total, 2433 plus the 438. And this will be the new total. This will be the total amount for the tip and the pizza. 4.38, and you're going to get 28.71. All right, but how do we do it the other way? Let's find out. And I know I've said this before, just make sure you're doing it the way that makes the most sense to you, okay? So you guys get to choose. 18% tip, that's an increase, so we're going to add it to 100%. 18% plus 100% equals 118%. Okay, now we're going to take 118% of 2433. So let's do 2433 times, make this into a decimal, 1.18, and what will that equal? $27.70, well, that 0 gets bumped up by the 9 to a 1, so $28.71. All right, so there's those 4 problems. Let's go on to the next page. Okay, so here on problem number 13, we've got a table. So we have the old price, we have the percent of change, then you have the amount of change and the new price. So let's start working some of these problems. In all of these, this column times this column will equal this column. Okay, so this times this will always equal that. What about for this column? This column is always going to be this plus this, or minus it, depending on if it's a discount. So like if it's a discount, you're going to do the old price minus this. But if it's an increase or an improvement or something that indicates going up, you're going to do this column plus this column. Okay, let's get started. So the amount of change here, it's a discount, but we don't actually need to know that yet. That's what we really need here. So let's figure out what 20% of 9.25 is. And 9.25 times 20%. Move that decimal 2 places and you get 0.2. You could put 0.20. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change it. And the amount of change is going to be 9.25 times 0.2. 1.85. That's the amount of change, and remember it's a discount. So when it comes time to calculate the new price, you're going to do this minus this. So 9.25 minus 1.85 equals 7.4. $7.40. And that's your new price. Okay, let's do the next one. This time we have the old price and we have the new price, but we're missing the percent change and the amount of change. To find the amount of change, let's do this minus this. Okay, so 52 minus 40 equals 12. So now we know 12 is the amount of change. Was it an increase or a decrease? Look at these two numbers. It went up, right? So let's say increase. So $12 increase. So now we need to figure out what percent of 40 equals 12. So 40, so P percent of the old price would be 40 times P. You could also do P times 40. It doesn't matter which one. So 40 times P is going to equal the increase, which was 12. And so divide that 40 out so that you get the P by itself, and you're going to have 0.3. All right, now am I done? Not quite yet. That P reminds me to move the decimal. So we're going to need another 0 there, and our percentage increase is going to be a 30% increase. Okay, and that's how you do that one. Now 15, this one is just a little bit trickier, right? Because you don't have the old price and you don't have the amount of change. But what you can do here is you can use kind of the same setup that we were using in the green ink over here, where you have the one step where you have the old price times a single percentage equals the new price. So the old price times some percentage equals the new price. Okay. So the old price, I will not say O for that because that would be confusing. I'll just write an X. Times a percentage is going to equal this new price. Actually, it's not a price, it's points. Just kidding. But anyways, what about this percentage? We're not going to use 30 because, again, we're using this method where you had to add 100. Sorry, there should be a percent sign. You had to add 100% to that percent. So let's see. It's an improvement, so that means it went up. So we're going to add 100%. So the percentage that we're going to use in this formula is actually the 130%. So x times 130%, let's move our decimal because we never put a raw percentage in an equation. So 1.3, you can put 1.30 if you want, it won't change it. So our old price times this percentage will give us our new, not price, points, but you know what I mean, 852. Okay, now we just need x by itself, so let's divide that out. 852 divided by 1.3, let's see, 655.38. And we're not calculating a percentage, we're just calculating a number, so leaving 2 decimal points is plenty. You don't have to do 5 this time. So 655.38. Okay, and it looks like our unit is points, so I'm going to write that as well. Okay, so we used our little nifty trick to turn 30% into 130%, and then we multiplied that all together and figured out the old. Now we need to just figure out the amount of change. The amount of change is going to be the difference between the old and the new, so we are just going to subtract. We're going to subtract whichever number first and whichever number second will give us a positive number in the end. And if you do it the wrong way around, you can just switch them and that's fine. 852 minus 655.38, 196.62. Now you might ask yourself, can you have 0.38 of a point? Well, that's a good question, and who knows what game we're playing here. We're just going to go with it and keep it as exact as possible. So we have this here, and we have this here. So we started out with 600 something points, then we had a 30% improvement, and the amount of change there was 196 or so points, and then the new total was 852. Let's go on to problem number 16. So you have 12 yards for the old, don't know the percent of change, and then you have a 5-yard loss. If you're losing yards, is that an increase or a decrease? That is a decrease. Good. So let's go ahead and figure out our new amount. We're going to have to what? Add or subtract them if there's a decrease. If there's a decrease, you want to subtract them. So start out with 12. You lose 5, you wind up with 7 yards. And an angry football coach, right? Let's figure out the percent change. So your old times some percent will equal the 5. So 12 times p, whatever it is, equals 5. You get the p by itself by getting rid of the 12, and you wind up with p equals 5 divided by 12, 4.41, here, let's see, 0.41, and then a bunch of 6s. I'm just going to keep 5 decimal places. That way I can move my decimal point and I can round. So the p reminds me to move it. We've got to move it 2 places to make it into a percent. And you're going to get 41.6. And now I would write this 6, but I know that this next number is going to bump that one up to a 7. So I'll say 41.67% decrease. Okay. And that's how you do that. Okay, let's look at number 17. I'm going to switch back to pink here. Find the total bill, okay, good to know, for a dinner that cost this much, $35.22, and you want to leave a 15% tip. Okay, so it sounds like we're going to have to find the tip and then add it back to this amount. So first we need to find 15% of that, and that of is a good hint that we're going to have to multiply it. So 15% times that, but first, remember to move your decimal. So 0.15 times 3522. And it doesn't matter which one of these guys you write first. If you wanted to write the dollar amount times 0.15, that's totally fine. The main thing here to remember is that you got to move that decimal point. And you're going to get $5.28 for the tip. So the percentage times the total is telling us the amount of the tip. We know it's $5.28. Now let's just add it back to that 3522. And you're going to get a new total of, let's see, 5.28 plus 35.22. Looks like we're going to get $40.5. We'll add another 0 after the 5 for $40.50. Okay, you guys don't have to do this problem. In fact, I might even rearrange the page so you don't even see that problem. I don't know, but the next one that you're going to be doing is here about Mr. Laws, either number 18 or number 19. Mr. Laws wishes he had $98,200 in a bank account bearing 7.25% simple interest. You guys, if you find a bank account that bears 7.25% interest, you should put a lot of money in there. That's a very good interest rate. If he did and he left it there for 3 years and 3 months, how much money would he have? Okay, so let's talk about that formula. Do you guys remember it? We have P. No. Wait, just kidding. Does Miss Smith remember the formula? Yes, I do. I just had a moment there. Interest equals PRT. Interest equals principal times rate times time. Okay? What we need to do in a problem like this is figure out the amount of interest and then add it back to the original amount that he put in there. Now, this original amount that you put in a bank account or wherever, that is called the principal. So that is the P. That 7.25%, that's the interest rate, so that's the R. And 3 years, 3 months is the time. Let's write this a little bit differently. So 3 years, so I'm going to write 3 months. That's 3 months out of 12, right? So I'm going to write 3 and 3/12. Still not a great way to write it, so you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take my 3 and divide it by 12 to turn this part of it into a decimal. 0.25, a fourth of a year. Okay, let's write it like that, 3.25. And that is the T. So we have a P, we have an R, and we have a T. All we have to do is find the I, find the interest, and then add it back to the principal, and we'll have an answer to our problem. So let's do this. I equals P R, remember to move your decimal point because you're never going to put a raw percentage into an equation. And with a decimal place, with a percentage like this, make sure you move it the full 2 places. You have to provide your own 0. Okay, and now T we decided was 3.25. So these 3 numbers are all multiplied to each other. So let's put that in the calculator and just keep hitting multiply. So let's see, 98200 times 0.0725 times 3.25. And that is going to be this number, $23,138. $23,138. And let's see, that 7 in the cents place, we need to bump it up to an 8 because of that 5 there. So 0.38. All right, so we have this amount of interest. That's a pretty healthy amount of interest right there. And we need to add that back to the $98,200 that he originally invested. So we've got this interest plus the original principal. It's going to look like that. And the total amount will be, let's see, 23,138.38. I think I entered that wrong. Let me try that again. 23,138.38. My brain is getting tired, you guys. 98,200. Looks like his new total is going to be 121,338 0.38. And that's a number of dollars. So there we go. And you can write your comma there if you want to. Now, I'm not asking you guys to do number 20. In fact, it might not even have made it to your page depending on how I format things. Instead, I have an error analysis. Oops, and I forgot to print this out correctly. Hold on one second. Okay guys, thanks for waiting. I've got it now. Now all this writing that you see here, this is Susan's solution. And we need to figure out what she did wrong. It says Susan was given a problem involving percents and she made a mistake when solving. Look at her solution below. Your job is to explain what she did wrong and to solve it correctly. So this is a little error analysis for you. So what Susan's doing is she's finding the total cost when you have a game for $37.65 plus the sales tax, which is 6.5%. So it looks like she multiplied things out. She did that price. This here was the original, right? So that's good. She's multiplying the original by the percentage of sales tax. That's good, right? What did she do wrong here? Well, 6.5%, she turned it into a decimal. Or did she? When you move that decimal point, you got to move it 2 places. So she should have done 37.65 times 0.065 to figure out the tax. And what you could do when you're marking this on your paper, you could just circle that and say error should be 0.065. And that's enough for identifying the error. Now when you're looking for these errors, if you just can't seem to find it, it's always a good idea to just kind of maybe cover up what she did, come down here, solve it on your own, and then compare your work with hers. Sometimes it's easier to spot the error that way. Just a little tip. Okay, and also if you're looking at a price for an item and it's like $37 and you calculate the tax to be $24, boy, that's a whole lot of tax, right? So if your tax ever just seems way too high, relatively speaking, then check your percentage. Okay, so now we have to do the second half, which is solve it correctly. So I've already started writing this. Let's go ahead and calculate that. 37.65 times 0.065 equals 2.4, let's bump that up to a 5. 2.45, which is a much more reasonable amount of tax on a $37 purchase. Now we have to add those numbers back together, so 2.45 plus 37.65 equals what? 2.45 plus 37.65 equals 40.1, and you'll put another 0 after that, so 40.10. In other words, $40.10 is going to be her correct total. Okay, so thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll do another practice test tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.